online now, and Dr. Howard will chair this session. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you, Shushan, and thank you, OncoDaily, for setting this up. The floor is yours, dear friends. Also in the chat, please put the chat. We can see them, or Shushan can pass them on from the chat. So please put your questions there.
Scott, are you asking us or the audience?
I would prefer the audience to go first, but I did want to say one thing, because it was such a pleasure to hear you, Professor Zhang, one more time. We're sitting together in Saudi Arabia, actually, or we're sitting separately in Saudi Arabia, where she presented some really interesting data on the sarcoma part. But I was just thinking of, China has helped the world so much, first with massive manufacturing capacity for generic drugs, and next thing you know, with massive research capacity accruing on clinical trials, and next thing you know, with massive drug development capacity, with so many new molecules that even in 20 minutes, you can't even say them all briefly. So I really appreciate it. And I wonder, Prof. Zhang, is there a chance to get these out of China? How can these medicines escape from China and help the rest of us?
You mean that we have some new drug in China?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can we get it out of China? Because we all need these things also, especially in middle and low income countries.
We want to complete the phase 1 trial in our Chinese center, and then we hope to push the drug company to conduct the multi-center or international clinical trial. International clinical trial include more countries, and then we can push the drug to more indications, get indications in pediatric cancer. I think that's our way to go.
Well, we will really appreciate it here in Armenia and Saudi Arabia and El Salvador and France and Africa when you get to that point. So I appreciate it.
I think some drug company they were willing to invest to this field, to the pediatric cancer field, to focus or pay more attention to the pediatric cancer patient, and then they will work together to push the clinical trial from phase 1 to phase 2, from single center to multi-center to international center. I think so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Scott, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
I think you presented a very compelling evidence of the importance of blinatumomab for children with ALL in relapse and the frontline setting. You showed some cost effectiveness, but it remains an expensive drug, even though the price may be a little bit lower in some countries than the others. And I will share that even in Europe, where the drug is approved, there are countries where blinatumomab is not available, even though it has a marketing authorization. So my question to you is, for this drug, which is still a protected drug, a patented drug, it's not a generic, what are the concrete measures that can be taken to really make this drug affordable in the low middle income country and maybe in some of the not so middle country?
I love this question because I was hearing a presentation from a colleague in Sweden, and he mentioned some targeted therapies for adults with AML. And I said, this is incredible that you have access to this. And he goes, no, the study closed last year and our government didn't approve it for reimbursement. So even though it's like half of Europe and the US has frontline approved, easily reimbursed, he says, we can't in Sweden, even though we did the study that got the reimbursement everywhere else. So I think it is very important. The idea of access is not just for low-income countries or middle-income countries. However, I do think it's fair that pharma companies are for-profit companies. Well, Servier is actually a nonprofit, but most pharma companies are for-profit, and they're gonna make their money somewhere. So I do think the best place to make their money is in the high-income countries, where they can charge a high fee to us, especially in the U.S., where we apparently have a very high healthcare budget available. So in a way, I don't mind that the richer countries are subsidizing maybe the access programs. But in the access programs, I have talked to colleagues in Servier and in Amgen, who are two of the participants in these programs we've discussed. And they basically both have the same idea, which is, hey, we have a list of countries where we are never going to sell this medicine. There's no commercial market. It will never be profitable. It will never, just the price, the fees to get in regulatory approval. So it's never going to work. So these are the countries where they said we want and we ethically must have an access program to help children in those countries. And so obviously nobody can help every country and every child all at once, but if we don't ever start, we can never finish. So for example, Amgen did a program with St. Jude where they supported blinatumomab use in relapse patients in India and Pakistan and Vietnam and I'm not sure where all the places were, but quite a few places. And it cost them a lot of money and a lot of free medication and a lot of work they had to do internally to liberate the regulatory, legal, budget, and medicine itself, and handle the logistics of delivery and the cold chain. So it's a lot of work. And so then when they're thinking, how are we going to scale that up? Also, it was a lot of work for St. Jude. And I know we all think of St. Jude as like infinite resource, but it turns out it's not actually infinite. There are some limits. And so they can't, all the training that's required to implement blinatumomab, it's a lot. And so I think rituximab for everybody, this should be immediate action, no downside, got to do it. And especially in Africa, in places with a lot of Burkitt lymphoma, we have to do that because then we could take out something that's more toxic and maybe have less toxic death and less relapse. So I think there is a strong commitment. Getting onto the global platform, the WHO St. Jude platform, is critical because as both companies said, look, we can't afford to go to every country. The platform can. The platform is built for this. In fact, Andre, I'd like to hear your ideas of why the platform is such a facilitator and a lever, because of what a company has to do one by one by one.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, and it's great to see you, and thanks to all the presenters for such a great discussion today. So what we, as briefly shared earlier, our objective is to institutionalize it within government agencies that have that function. And if they don't exist, help strengthen functions within those existing government, because that's the only way to make this sustainable. Access programs, we all have a heart for them because not many of us have worked in countries where you see the child in the clinic or the family in the clinic waiting and hoping or abandoning care because they simply can't afford or have access to the medicine. Access programs are an important short-term approach, but what we hope to do with the platform is, again, institutionalize this, to work with regulators. And this is, again, where WHO, we have these experiences. UNICEF has these great experiences. And of course, now with the link within the St. Jude global network of hospitals, we can bring all the stakeholders to the table so that when the product is made available, the company doesn't have to take responsibility for the regulatory approval. There is a pathway for that we can facilitate as part of the platform. The company doesn't have to take care of the supply chain. We invest in the infrastructure to make sure the supply chain is in place. The company doesn't have to worry about diversion. We have mechanisms to track and trace and understand where products are going and for what purposes. The company doesn't have to worry about bad publicity because of an adverse event. We have mechanisms for pharmacovigilance and for reporting. And so these are the types of, again, investments that we want to make. They don't come on day zero. Obviously, these programs take time, but it's the recognition that in many of the countries, they know this is a challenge and they're trying to develop institutions themselves that have these functions. And so our opportunity as a platform is to go there and say, we see that you're trying to develop a stronger national regulatory authority. Let's figure out how we can work together for a facilitated regulatory pathway that doesn't overburden you and leverages the fact that these are approved by stringent regulatory authorities. Or how can we look at pre-qualification to help minimize the regulatory burden, custom clearance. These are all the aspects that, again, we try to mainstream. And so while we do need to talk about access programs, we are slowly looking at a complete revamp of the market approach so that all countries, all national stakeholders, all children can be seen on equal footing. It is a understandable hope that high-income countries can subsidize the cost for low and middle-income countries. But again, there are business models that can make it possible for all countries to have access. It will come in due order, and the platform is a springboard to make this a reality.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to hear from you, Roberto, in El Salvador. If you don't you guys are one of the first countries selected for the platform, or I think maybe number 9 out of 12 or something like that. How do you know of the concrete steps that were taken, or was that other people who were doing those steps?
No, in El Salvador has been an incredible process. When we start with pegdaspargina, that is an example I can manage very well because I had followed all the process. The drug is not available in the commercial way, so there is not we call it a number of in the registration number in the Ministry of Health, not even in our federal drug regulatory institution. So we asked to the authority, how can we do available the drugs in our setting? And they said there was only one way in our protocol with that question. So we have to solve the problem that there was some incredible use drug in all the countries and the developed countries, and that we have for sure increase our outcomes. And we had to do a regulatory part, which is part of the pharmacies. That is, we had to report all the adverse events. So if we can accomplish that two things, we can import the drug directly to our foundations to have available for the patients without any cost. So the only problem for the government, I guess, has not to be commercial, because I guess this move the market. I don't know, but I have my ideas. And if we can have these protocols, and we have for sure have these adverse event reports to the entity which is in charge of that, we can import the drug and we can use it without any cost. Even there was some tax that was that our foundation have a commitment and work an arrangement with the presidential house, and we can avoid even taxes for that. But we have to do it in a protocol. If there is not protocol, we cannot use it because it's not registration. There is not registration for the drugs. And for the future, let's say that if we can do that for the other, I was thinking even venetoclax, you told me, Scott, and I have been reading that in low intensity group of patients treated for acute myeloid leukemia, venetoclax can increase the survival. Well, this is maybe another goal for our foundation to achieve. And we have to, who are in the protocol in the first steps, and then we have to think about it. But it's a process that's in countries in Central America with Ministry of Health that have similar condition is possible. It's not so far away.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And also, I'm glad you mentioned the role of a protocol when bringing access to new medications or to old medications that might finally be available on a stable basis thanks to access programs like the platform. Gilles, I wonder if you want to comment about why you have to have a protocol to make this work and to make it safe. Because GFAOP, for me, this is like the essence of protocol-based care.
You were talking about GFAOP. Sorry, I didn't switch the gear.
Or why you have to have a protocol. So like in Roberto's case, this government required it.
No,
but I think in your case...
So yeah. Sorry. I was on the mode PSYOP International informing the WHO Essential Medicine list, and then you asked me a question from GFAOP.
I'm using your whole brain.
Sure. I am not from the GFAOP, which is the Groupe Français Franco-Africain d'Oncologie Pediatric in the Sub-Saharan Africa, which has been created years ago by Professor Jean Lemaire. And clearly the vision was to increase the capability to give access to good treatments to all patients, is to create dedicated units with people who are trained and using protocol. And this is what has been published over years, which is now there is a big registry with recommendation where they are capturing data for the treatment for ALL, retinoblastoma, Burkitt's lymphoma, and so on. So clearly the vision is clinical research really drive the quality of the treatment in addition to improving the survivals. But again, I am not from GFAOP. I'm just sharing.
No.
Okay. Sorry.
You don't have to endorse them. I endorse them because I think they're terrific and they're helping a lot of children with cancer. But my spies told me that you were bringing rituximab to Burkina Faso and and some other places as part of protocol-based support.
Oh, indeed. You mentioned blinatumomab for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Rituximab is now a well-informed, validated, authorized for the treatment of large B-cell lymphoma and Burkitt lymphoma in children. And clearly the goal is really to make this available for all children with this disease as part of the global initiative on childhood cancer, because clearly it did 10% in the high-income countries treatment protocol and can really improve on the top of these treatments without doxorubicin the survival of this patient. And clearly we showed in the PSYOP working group on social medicine that there are quite a few countries, not a few, but several or even more, where the drug is not available. And clearly this is at the moment, since it's not the global initiative, the global platform is not available in all countries in the future, but not yet. The goal is how to identify in a few countries some solution to make the drug available. And this is why the GFAOP has been working in 2 countries where there's a very high incidence of this Burkitt lymphoma, which is Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast. And we hope, with the help of Servier, that we will be able to provide rituximab for this patient. But it's just one example on how to move forward. And the question is, how can we multiply all this example and have a more global initiative really to put this forward? Which was a question about blinatumomab. I think there is a very strong case how really to make this available for all.
Yeah, but I love that we're talking about access strategies. So we have access through commercial access, just buy it and use it. Perfect. If you can afford it, and if it's approved and if it's reimbursed, then it could be perfect. We have access through the global platform, also perfect if you're one of the countries and if it has the medicines you need for this particular patient. So in other words, the perfect strategy commercial is not actually perfect. There's some gaps. The perfect strategy platform also has some gaps. Maybe your country is number 25, or maybe you're a high-income country, and you're never going to be supported by this particular platform. So in other words, we need other access strategies. A third one that Anna mentioned is access through philanthropy. And I wonder, and I want to say about City of Smile and how that's been working over the past years, because I think it's really an important additional access strategy. Can you say a few words about access through philanthropy and the role of City of Smile charity, Armenia?
Yes, of course. Unfortunately, only a small part of the essential medications is covered by the government of Armenia. The most part of the medications and diagnostic tools is covered by the charitable foundation. In Armenia exists the main foundation covering whole treatment and diagnostic called City of Smile. And even they do their own best to provide the essential medication to our children. However, when it comes to the high expensive medications and like the immunotherapy, blinatumomab, and others, we have to prioritize patients and to choose with our medical team and the foundation who needs that medication most. And sometimes if the cost is too high, they initiate some charitable programs to get medication, to get funding for cases when the price is not affordable for the charity, for the foundation. Yeah, but through through all these initiatives, we somehow already the burden to the foundation was decreased. For example, they have not to pay for the pegasperginase at this moment, and this helps us to transfer that money to other parts, to other medications and diagnostic tools that we need at this moment.
Yeah. And in fact, that was exactly my next point, which is of all the access strategies, we want all of them, right? It's not either or, it's both and. And if somebody will donate a batch of medicine, then that foundation can put that money toward the next thing. The needs are unfortunately infinite, right? Or too much. And so then Professor Zhang showed us the many options of access through research. Her patients going on study, do they have to pay for those study drugs? No, they do not. Study drug is free. And so access through research is another way. So my dream is to have infinite research everywhere, answering questions that pharma companies need answered. And, if it's a study drug, and in a way also, I like it because it liberates us from this donor-recipient model. It makes us collaborators. Like, hey, we're giving you data that you need to help, advance your product. You're giving us your product, which we need to cure our patients. So that it's more of a collaboration instead of a donation. And that brings me to the last point, which is ACT for Children. And since Manette had to go, so I wanted to make one comment about that. It's just yet another access strategy designed to complement all the other access strategies. And so this one is basically to say, what if I have a patented drug? What is my greatest fear with a patented drug? If I put it on a platform, what if it goes somewhere and sneaks off and gets sold to somebody else? So diversion. Luckily, Andre, I want to finish with you commenting on anti-corruption, anti-diversion, and all the steps that the platform has taken to avoid the very common problems that occur at our planet. But before you take at the end of this meeting, I wanted to finish the ACT for Children. So the idea is they have 3 fears. Fear number 1, diversion. And these are not in order of importance. They're just 3 fears. Fear number 2 is somebody uses our drug that we provided through Access platform and the patient dies of preventable toxicity because the supportive care was not there, the knowledge was not there. Blinatumomab is great, but it is no picnic to deliver it. It's a lot of work, 28-day infusion, a lot of logistical work. It has side effects that have to be managed, aggressively managed. So if you just close your eyes and put blinatumomab, you might hurt people, and you're not going to hurt as many as you help, but you might hurt a lot and help even more, but you're still going to hurt too many. And if somebody dies during an access program, that ruins it for the whole company and for every other patient, because no company can withstand the negative things that happen if a patient dies from their drug who should have lived. And so the third fear is sort of a lifelong obligation, let's say, where, hey, I helped you out for 5 years and now I have to help you for 50 years. It's not really fair to ask companies to do infinite support with no limits, in the future. So this is where you could imagine, what has ACT for Children done? It brought pegasparaginase to El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras and Armenia and Indonesia. It's arriving in Indonesia tomorrow or day after tomorrow. Perfect. Great. So that's a donation because pegasparaginase is not yet on the platform. But how to make it sustainable? A donation is not sustainable. It's a one-time thing, good for 6 months, 1 year. We'll see. But it needs to then go onto the platform and have a way to be sustainable first by the platform, but also the platform can't make an infinite commitment, right? Because eventually the government has to come, the insurance companies have to come, but the platform can say, look, we've got now a pricing structure and a market structure and a delivery mechanism that everybody is used to. It's cheap, it's effective, it's just working well. So now you don't have to create all that. All you have to do is just put in a little money to bring down all the necessary medicines. And so that's why I'd like you to finish us out, Andre, with comments about sustainability, anti-corruption, and any final thoughts.
Thanks, Scott. What a great privilege. And thank you to all who are listening. More than 300 people is quite a remarkable reflection of how dear to our hearts this topic is. Scott, thanks for great moderation, because I think this is the perfect phase out and moment for us to pause and reflect a little. So for those 3 fears, the easy answer is for all of us to say we have a vision. We know how to address these issues. We're doing it in each of our programs, whether it's the platform or ACT or JFAOP's work or clinical trials. We all live with these fears. And yes, our different initiatives have mechanisms to address those fears. In fact, for the platform, as an example, we're developing now the sustainability strategy, because this is not the reality of the platform changes and the reality of childhood cancer market changes day to day. We need to be adaptable, we need to be responsive, and we need to be keep a lens on the future for what is best for communities. So maybe rather than closing on those 3 fears, which I think are extremely important to be honest about and to say out loud. And maybe we could also close with 3 hopes. So the first is the recognition that the fears that we all live with, speaking for myself at WHO headquarters, to some extent disconnected from clinical reality. I'm a clinician myself. And so I do take note that I live in a different world. But the hope that I have is that if we start by listening to the families, if we start by listening to local stakeholders, the solutions are there. They're the ones that are most worried about diversion. They're the ones that are most worried about side effect profiles. They're the ones that are worried about their own families and the next generation. And so if we start listening to the local solutions, that's the hope. These types of webinars are great to inspire intellectual exchanges. But the hope is that if we listen to the communities most affected, which I think the OncoDaily gave voice to today, let's just remember that as a hope for the future. The second is to build on what exists. There's still a lot of coming in, construct a new pathway, construct a new program. And then when we leave, okay, we've left and all that infrastructure is gone. That's true for access programs. That can be true for clinical trials. That can be true for many of the initiatives that we've been part of. But what we've learned in the childhood cancer community, I think a lot in the past 7 years, is many programs exist. Let's also invest in what the national infrastructure is for regulatory agencies, for pharmacovigilance, for clinical training and guidelines. There are areas that we can build on. And if we're seen as builders, not as replacers, then we have a more sustainable future together. And then the last, I think, Scott, you touched on all the points you touched on. The third hope that I have is to also keep an eye on innovation. We all talk about the benefit of clinical trials, and that's a critical aspect. But we're also seeing great innovations in manufacturing techniques. We're seeing the manufacturing costs of producing monoclonal antibodies come down quite quickly. We're hopeful for new therapies like CAR T therapy that are emerging on markets. We need innovation. We need better ways of working, better access to clinical trials, better manufacturing techniques, better data systems, better ways of training. And that's the only way that this is going to work, because the business model doesn't balance very favorably when we talk about trying to give $20,000 of medicines to every child around the world with cancer, given the economic realities that we live in. It does look a lot better if we find ways to drive that price down or drive that cost down. So 3 fears: diversion, I think, side effect profile, as you said, management of toxicities and lifelong obligations. Let's balance them with the 3 hopes of child-centered, family-centered care, sustainability, building on what already exists, and then a lens on innovation. So for us, that's what we're thinking about on the platform. We think all of us are thinking about that, whether it's the great work of Gilles or Berta, Professor Zhang, Anna, and others. So let's keep those hopes. Let's remember that it's the children that inspire us. And I reserve the hope that in 5 years, OncoDaily will bring us back together with a little more gray hair, a little more energy, I hope, and a much better optimistic view to share. So thank you, Scott. Thank you, OncoDaily. And it's been a great privilege to be here.
Oh, this is the perfect closing. I really appreciate it. And also, Andrea, your 3 hopes already came true, because Act for Children has mechanisms to avoid those 3 problems. So I miscommunicated because I wanted to highlight it's like the gentle introduction of somebody who has an innovator drug, like a still patented drug, how to get them onto the platform to say, hey, the information system is going to track every dose. So if you're willing to give your blinatumomab or your pegosparaginase or your temozolomide, every dose will be accounted for. We won't tell you, but we'll know which child got it. And that this vial went to this child, that dose went to that child. So there won't be any diversion, because it'll be fully documented and traceable. And there'll be a wraparound training program and protocol-based care, which is Roberto's requirement anyway. To get the medicine into the country, you got to have a protocol. So the idea is that Act for Children is specifically to de-risk all that, and then to make sure your hopes can become a reality. Because when will that, if it transitions over to the platform, then the de-risking has to be taken over by the local team, right? Just exactly like you said. And I got to tell you a story of innovation, because I was just sitting in this PsyOp Asia, and there was a whole session of Hodgkin lymphoma. And the radiation therapist got up there and he said, well, let me show you this latest. He said, here's our fields, here's how we do it. He said, but I'm going to stop short, because here's the latest clinical trial, which is ABV plus nivolumab. Nivolumab, a checkpoint inhibitor, immunotherapy, with 3 very old, very cheap, very generic chemotherapies. And it was 95% event-free survival. And out of 1,000 patients on the study, or 900 something, 6 got radiation. So 99% got no radiation. And he said, looks like an innovation in medication has made me unnecessary here. So I'll go over to the other session and you carry on over here about making sure people have access to nivolumab, because nivolumab will be generic soon. And also, Usual already has her checkpoint inhibitor coming down the pipe, made in China for Chinese, but I hope for all of us eventually. So I love your idea of innovation as a way to sort of radically reduce costs. Because what if we didn't need radiation? Imagine IAEA could invest their talent and energy on other things. We could have so much liberation of energy. It's really good. So thank you.
And brentuximab, both drugs.
For example.
Yeah,
exactly. All about access. So that's why I really thank you. And Shushan, give us our closing word and blessing.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think we had a wonderful discussion. Thank you for the wonderful moderation, Dr. Howard. And it was a critically important topic that we covered today. Thank you to all our speakers for their time and for their commitment. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.